Good morning. Welcome to this episode of Refill with Randy. Grab your favorite cup, fill it up, and let's start this day right together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Well, happy Friday. It was getting a little too windy and noisy outside, so I'm now inside. I've transitioned to a cup from Eastside Free Methodist Church in Fairport, New York, Pastor Jeremy Kelly. Shout out. Today we're going to take a look at just the last couple of verses of Psalm 23. We've already looked at how God is a good provider. He will take care of all of our needs, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We talked about how we don't need to fear when we're walking through that valley of the shadow of death because He is with us. His rod, His staff, they will comfort us. I used the analogy of getting past the bully last time, but another analogy, and it goes with something I said briefly last week, was we don't have to fear that valley. We don't have to fear death because when Jesus Christ died on the cross, He overcame death, and Scripture says He took the sting away for us. I don't know if you've ever been stung by a bee, but just like getting hit by a truck shadow, it would be a lot easier to get, stung by a fuzzy bee butt rather than the stinger itself. I've been stung a number of times. One time, Cheryl and I, we were actually camping up to Watkins Glen on our anniversary. And we had redistributed some of the things around the campground. And so as we were packing up, getting ready to leave, we decided we should move everything back to where it was. And so we walked over and we each took an end of this very thick, very heavy picnic table. And as we began to pick it up, all of a sudden, I started to feel the worst pain in my chest. And I thought, I'm having a heart attack. I mean, that's how bad it was. Well, what had happened was, unbeknownst to us, there had actually been a hive right underneath that section of the picnic table. And so when we lifted it and jarred it, they came out and they flew right up my shirt. And they started to sting me all over right around my heart. And so, I was a little nervous just by how many stings and the placement of it. And so we got in the car. Cheryl took me down to the ranger station. After waiting for what felt like way too long, we were told that we couldn't even get ice there for the swelling because they didn't want to be liable. So we went back down the hill, and there's a little grocery store there. And I remember I ran in, I threw my shirt off, I grabbed some steak seasoning, out of the aisle. I ran back to where there was a drinking fountain, and I started to pour seasoning in my hand, and then I would get some water from the fountain, and I'd mash it up, and I started to spread it all over my chest just to draw the stingers and anything else along with it out. And it was a bit of a scary experience. I'd never had that type of reaction with being stung before. But it really made me think. And again, if it wasn't for the stinger, it wouldn't matter how many bees or how many yellow jackets had flown up my shirt and, rubbed against me, basically. It wouldn't have hurt, it would have tickled. And even though death feels scary, because we often think of death as one whole thing, physical, spiritual, the fact that Jesus made it so that even though we experience physical death but not spiritual, it takes away that fear. It's but a tickle compared to what it would really be like. And so we don't need to fear death. Yes, shadows can be scary. I'm sure that we've all jumped at a shadow at some point in our life, only to find out that, what it represents, it wasn't that bad at all. Probably just a shirt hanging over the back of a chair or something. And it's that same way. It's the valley of the shadow of death. And he will protect us. And so that brings us to the end of the psalm. And God is not done with his promises. This is where he says, I will prepare a table before you. I think of that great feast, in the parable. I think of communion. Whenever I receive communion or serve communion, I think about this. It's just a precursor for what's to come. He's going to lay out this feast for us, and it says that he will anoint our heads with oil right there in the midst of our enemy. Now, that's not a physical enemy. It's not even the spiritual enemy that we, fight while here on earth, but rather it's the enemy of death itself. We're anointed, and so even though, we pass through that first filter of physical death, nothing else can happen to us. We get to go on. And it says that we will dwell in God's house forever. Love's going to follow us around. How good is that? That sounds like heaven to me. There are so many promises, and they're not just for the next life. They're for this life as well. And I would encourage you, take some time this week. Just meditate on that passage. I memorized it a long time ago. That's why probably some of you, if you're trying to read along, you're wondering why it sounds a little different. If you're using the updated 2011 NIV, I typically quote the 1983 version. That's when I was a quoter in Bible quizzing, and so that's what I often refer back to. But take some time, meditate on it. Think about, how each element, making you lie down in green pastures, leading you beside quiet waters, guiding you in those paths of righteousness, through the valley of the shadow of death, without fear, at the table, anointed, with love following you all the rest of your life. What does that mean to you? I hope that as you consider that, you consider the source. Because we serve a good God who is good on his promises. He's the good shepherd who lays down his life for us. He's the good father who doesn't give us a snake if we ask for a fish, or a rock if we ask for bread. He is a good, good Father. And so today, rest in his arms, enjoy the weekend, take him at his word, and friends, have a great day.